Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to The Downside. My name is Gianmarco Soresi. I'm here with my co-host Russell Daniels.
Hello.
And we're so excited. I'm very happy to be joined. Stand-up comedian, writer, podcaster, Josh Gondelman. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. So nice to see you both.
Well, good. We're going to keep it sad. And I don't know where we're going to start this recording, but unfortunately, rest in peace to the legendary Norm Macdonald.
1, 2, 3. Downside.
You're listening to The Downside.
The Downside.
With Gianmarco Soresi.
Yeah, so that's where we're starting. We just found out about that. So
5 minutes ago.
This is a negative podcast, Josh. I know it's going to be tough for you. Mm-hmm. Your podcast is kind of like the opposite of this podcast.
I do. My podcast, Make My Day, is the full opposite. Is just we're trying to put a positive spin on everything. But I'm excited. I'm excited to get out of my comfort zone, and really, because I love a good complain.
You do.
I love a good complaint.
Dark. I listened to all your albums.
Oh, thank you.
Again, I'd listened to them before, but
thank you so much.
You know, there's a darkness behind that smile. There's some good suicide jokes. A wrist cutting joke was one of my favorites. So you have it.
Well, I love a dark joke, and I also think that I think I'm a pretty optimistic guy, but I think that people think that when you're an optimistic person, it's because you think things are good, and that's not true.
I love that.
There's so many things that are bad. I just think they can be better, right? And we have the capacity to improve them, and people can be good, but there's so much stuff that is awful. If you're just the kind of person that's hey, things are pretty good, right? It's that's not an optimist. That's a person who is detached from reality.
Yes, there's a difference between indifference and optimism.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to bring this down real fast, real quick. My dad is looks like he's going to have open heart surgery tomorrow. I just found that out too.
Oh my gosh.
So I think everything's fine with this, but I think tonight I'm going to get on a train to go to Maryland to go see him.
Wow.
Just found that out. It's been a crazy fucking week. I just saw him. It was we're gonna. This is the harshest beginning to this episode we've ever had.
Really. Is this because I kind of thought it was about kind of small time complaints, and you're okay, here's death.
So the last half an hour,
possibly life threatening surgery. No offense to your father. All my love to your family. But this, we're really hitting the ground with a thud, and I respect it.
So for you, we had to bring the big guns. I'm we got multiple deaths to start this one out. I just found out.
How did he find out? You found out half an hour ago. How did he find out?
So it's been quite a weekend. My grandfather's long delayed funeral was Saturday. He passed away last year, but we had this funeral on Saturday, which I want to talk about too. I saw my dad, the family. It functioned for about 1 hour and then it imploded. This is a family that can't stay together. There was a fight about the jewelry that was left behind, and my uncle said that the dad was cool with the jewelry being given away, and my dad started pocketing it and said, "No, that's not what it says."
No,
it was a we'll get to it, but my dad was getting some kind of checkup where it sounds fucking when they're they're gonna look into my heart and they're gonna start through my leg, and you're isn't there a closer place? Right. Isn't there a closer place to put it?
That is such a dad way to have a checkup, right? Where he's just I know a shortcut. We're not going to go the regular way. I know a shortcut to the heart. It's through the leg.
I think whenever I hear about that, I'm man, I think about all the people that had to die for them to figure out that they could get to the heart through the leg.
Yeah.
They tried the shoulder and the nose and the ear, and none of those made it.
And right through the chest, in Pulp Fiction.
That's where I would have gone with, right through the chest.
That would have been my number one. And then you go, no, it's always congested there. You got to go through the leg.
Yeah.
And so he got it checked out, and arteries are clogged badly. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he's been taking his medication. I don't feel like I have. I've always struggled communicating with my dad about his health because he exaggerates everything in life. So I never know when it's serious. He's not one of these dads. I know some people have dads that like, oh yeah, I had a open heart surgery last week. I didn't tell you. Not my dad.
That's my dad.
Okay.
That's my family. Is my mom, my dad had a very strange health scare like right before I was all the way vaccinated, so I couldn't go and see him. But my dad, his short-term memory disappeared for like a day.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And the doctors literally were like, it's amnesia. But they didn't say that really until the next morning. So like my sister texted me and was like, you should call mom. She's at the hospital with dad. And my dad now, he's fine, but he thinks it's hysterical. So he'll bring it up all the time. He's like, oh, did you bring in the groceries from the car? And he's like, oh, must have forgot. Classic me. Like he thinks it's so funny. And my mom just feels the terror of when her husband's brain went blank for 24 hours.
Was it like a stroke of some kind or no?
Truly, they call it global transient amnesia.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
That's my family. Is my dad thinks it's so funny, which it in a lot of ways it is, and I've been talking about it on stage, and my mom takes it very seriously, as well she should. But we don't have that like the gravity of just like, you know, I think my whole family kind of is like, oh, I didn't tell you, this person was in the hospital for 2 weeks and now they're fine, and it's like, oh, okay, sure. But so I like am very curious to hear how this played out with your family, because I have the full opposite experience.
He'll tell me everything, and it's really right now he has a girlfriend, an on again, off again girlfriend who's a little younger than me, and it's hard. She's very sweet. Whatever it is, she's there. She picks up the phone.
Wow.
But it's very hard to talk to my dad's kind of girlfriend to be like, hey, is my dad alive today? A week ago, she texted me, call me immediately. And I'm like, he's dead. Don't ever text me that. Don't ever text me. Call me immediately. I am a Jew.
Yeah.
I cannot get that text, and then she doesn't pick up the phone. And well, like, you know, she missed the first call. And I'm like,
of course. No, I don't blame her. It's like, that's tough. Right. The only thing worse than we have to talk later is we have to talk now.
Yeah. And so we briefly, I was grateful. The doctor came on the phone. So as my dad was talking to me and my younger sister, and, you know, this is the second time in my life where he like brings up the will, and it's just like, fuck, it's just horrible, just horrible feelings.
Yeah.
And the doctor came on and, you know, seemed old and wise and reasonable, and said, there's a 1.5% chance. I forget the term he used, whether it's dying on the table or mortality rate, but there's that thing.
One of those seems
interesting. It doesn't round up to 2%.
It is
kept it at 1.5. Usually you round up, but
I feel like if I'm a doctor, I bet you know that it makes people feel better to keep it in the 1% range.
Exactly. Yeah. Even 1.6, you'd say 1.6 and not round up.
Right. You still keep it precise.
Well,
it also feels more scientific, right? If he had been like 1.52, you're like, this guy really knows what he's doing.
Sure. If he was like, 2 to 3. 2 to 3%.
Like 2 to 3. What is it? This is a man's life. But if he's like 1.246, you're like, oh, this guy's got it figured out like I. Like he's done this before.
And you also get curious. You're like, is that your batting average? Is that everyone's batting average?
Wide, yeah.
But what's funny is, like, you know, that's kind of all. That's all the information I'm smart enough to know. Like I could, hey, tell me what you're gonna do in there.
Yeah.
And here's what I got. They're gonna take, I think, a veins from the leg and put it in the heart. But like, there's nothing else to say. Like, you want to talk more to the doctor just to hear more things, or some way for him to comfort you that, like, he'll make it 1.4. He's going to have a coffee. You know what? He slept really well last night. Yeah. He's feeling on his game today.
He's really sharpened the scalpel. He's defogged the scope. He's on it.
And I feel like my dad, he's a complainer. Like he's a tough customer. So I do trust that he gets people to do what he needs to do. Not always in a good way. It's not good at restaurants, but I do think it's good at hospitals. Because whenever you go to a workplace and you really think of a hospital as a workplace, you're like, yeah, people have bad days, or some guy shouldn't be there. Yeah, some guy, he's always dropping things, and
like a nurse gets hungover like anyone else, or a doctor, right? Like, oh yeah, we're coming out of the pandemic. Hopefully, coming out. Dua Lipa at a stadium last night, and we were out till 1. And it's like, you're a doctor. It's like, they're allowed to do that.
I think I brought this up where my last primary care physician, his diploma, the frame was about 4 times too big for his diploma, so it kind of fallen into the corner.
Yep.
And I was like, I need some more attention to detail.
It's imprecise
from my doctor.
Yeah.
My doctor, my current primary, I mean, I haven't talked to him. I haven't really been in touch over the pandemic. So like, he might not be with us. He's the oldest man I've ever seen in my life. I think he was there when they invented medicine. He was, because when they came up with first do no harm, he was like, I thought it was like first poke around for a while. he had a dissenting opinion, but he was like,
he knew Hippocrates. He was like, I helped him. I helped him clean it up. It was way longer before.
Yeah, it was bad. I call him Hippo. Hey, Hippo. But he said to me, he was like looking at my ears, and he's like, there's a little buildup, nothing too bad. We don't really need to go in. And I go, all right, cool. And he goes, as long as you can still hear your wife complain, huh? And I was like, with when you're like, the medicine can't be sexist.
Yeah.
Like, you can't hold my body to a sexist standard.
Oh man.
These old doctors. I saw my doctor yesterday. I was trying to get some Ambien, and I told him I used to have been prescribed Ambien, but I rarely took it because if I had a beer 4 hours before, I'd freak out.
Yes,
and then I'd die. And he loves being sarcastic, so he's like, yeah, a lot of people die from that. You hear it all the time. People dying. They have a beer. 3 days later, have an Ambien, they die. And he does it for a little, and I'm like, kind of, okay, you're a funny doctor. And then he keeps going. And then I just kind of get quiet, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to need a real answer now. I'm going to need a real stone cold, no sarcasm answer before I move on with my day.
Right. I get that I was being over the top, but like, how much can I drink before I have an Ambien before it's a problem?
Yeah.
You can't just give me the bit. You can't just do the bit.
Yeah, it's, and then I asked about pot, and I'm better about asking it, but like the doctors, they always have an answer that's like, you'll be fine, but they legally know they can't quite say that because if they say it and then I die, I'll sue them.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. This is definitely, I've said to my dad once, maybe twice before like a surgery, we have a tough relationship, but there is definitely something very like primal of you're going to go into this scary place. I've had one surgery now, which certainly made me understand what it means to be wheeled into a room alone. And I'm dreading it. I'm filled with dread right now about that moment where like I'm trying to give comfort to a man who, even though I don't go to him for comfort, there's he was my father.
Yeah.
To see him terrified.
Yeah.
It's very scary because I go, fuck, if you're terrified, who's going to comfort me when I'm terrified? And, certainly I feel like I'm at that age where I have a girlfriend right now, and there is that kind of mutual, like we're going to have to be each other's parents sometimes for each other.
Yep.
So just filled with dread.
That's so real, and that's so intense, and I'm so sorry that like you're finding out. I mean, I guess in a way there's like kind of a small mercy that like you just found out and then it's tomorrow and then you know how it went, right? It's not like 3 weeks ago they're like, okay, we're prepping him, we know that this is about to happen, and we have like all these pre-appointments and stuff. At least it's like, okay, this will be a horrible 3 days psychologically, and then 98.5% of the time it'll be totally fine and perfect after.
Yeah 98.5. And then I'm just figuring out, this is the first time I was supposed to go to Chicago tomorrow, not a headlining weekend, but like a bunch of gigs and then a college on Saturday. So I'm just like figuring out like, okay, what do I cancel now? What do I wait to see? Were there any big stand-up cancellations you had to do in your life?
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to think. I remember the I should have canceled more. I did spots the night of my grandmother's funeral, and I had a bunch of shows because I was supposed to go up to Boston anyway, where I'm from, and I went to the funeral, and I was just kind of like, well, there's, the funeral's done by 8 p.m.
Right.
and I will want to get out of the house, and I was just like not in a great headspace to be performing. I'm trying to think of like cancellation. I do think though, like basically anything, this kind of thing, people understand, and like, even if this particular gig doesn't come back around, like, you'll be fine. You know what I mean?
Or I'll be fine. It's just, and in my head, I like, this is one of those things where I'm like, yes, cancel, Gianmarco,
Yes.
cancel.
Yeah.
Go home.
Yep.
I know that, but there is still that thing in my head where I'm like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
I was my first time at Zany's.
Yep. I was really looking forward to the shows, and this was going to be money that I could have used and like all that stuff. And then I think like, I don't know, it's one of those things like when you apply for a writing job or you go out for an audition, right? You just like pull off the Band-Aid and then forget about it, right? You send in the packet and then you act like you never did it, or you do the audition and then you don't think about like, when am I going to hear about this callback? Because like once you've done the thing, it doesn't help to be like, oh, this, I bet right now I would have been getting on stage and people would have been clapping.
Yeah. It's just a whole different mode. Like in my brain, I'm already like, okay, let's say I get to the train station. I have some family there. I don't know if they're free. And it's like, if the Uber's $150 to the hospital, just get in the Uber.
Yep.
If the Uber back is $150. It's just like, I have to recontextualize everything right now of like, money's not an issue.
Yes.
Forget about it.
Right. Especially if you're like,
not an issue, forget about it.
I can't, right. Like if it's like, I can't afford the time, I can't afford the money. You just have to like write it all off now from like your, you know what I mean? And anything that you don't, like any time that you get back, like, oh, he's doing great. Like he actually wants a little privacy and like, you can go home now. Okay, great. Sure. But like, that's all kind of bonus goodwill, extra time and money. But yeah, like I feel like, there are times in your life probably, or I've had times where it's like the thing I really want to do to be there for family is like financially burdensome, and then you kind of go, okay, do I take the Uber or do I get on the like local commuter rail and then take the Uber from 30 miles closer, that kind of stuff. But like once you're like, this is what I have to do, and like if I lose the $150, it'll just be a pain in my ass next month, like, and that's fine. I think you just can't think about it. Like you're like, because then you get into the hospital room and you're like, I spent $150 fucking to be in this room right now. Every time you have like a contentious conversation.
Yeah.
I think you just spend the money, and then maybe once you're there, you pocket some of those jewels that your dad stole from your dad.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And then there you go.
It's just so hard, man. It's hard when you have these difficult, like, so there's this funeral on Saturday, and it's my dad and I sang at the funeral per my grandpa's request. I didn't force it.
Wait, which song was it that you sang again?
So I sang. It's a song from you know musicals, right, Josh?
Yeah.
This is from A Man of No Importance by Aronson Flaherty.
Okay.
Not a huge musical. It's called The Cuddles Mary Gave. It doesn't make sense.
I don't know
for me
it,
to sing
no.
it. I sang it at musical theater camp back in high school,
Sure.
but I just sang it forever. And I sang it to like my grandma when she was like basically dead, but like sang it. And then I sang it at her funeral at the same place. And he asked in his funeral instructions, my grandfather, step-grandfather technically, to sing it. Or if I didn't want to sing that, to sing Old Man River. And I was like, I'm going to stick with this song, I think. And it was, it felt, it's kind of embarrassing because you go up there and I'm performing.
Yes.
I'm trying to perform for the room.
Yeah.
It's nice because I think it is a pure thing where I'm like, my objective is really just to make this room it feels very pure. I'm not worried about, there was no industry there. I checked before.
Right.
And I sang, and then, all these old, it was at the retirement community, and all these old people were saying, oh, beautiful voice. And then my dad is like, why don't you go on America's Got Talent with that? And not like a fun, like, you should go on America's Got Talent.
Yeah.
Oh, stop it. Like, he was like, I don't understand. And I was
no.
Listen, I submitted for stand-up. They don't want me on America's Got Talent. And he was like, yeah, because you submitted for comedy. You need to submit for singing.
Oh.
And I'm like, are we really is this a real argument? Are we really going to have this argument? And I love the idea of all this retirement community, these beautiful old people, very kind souls, tuning into America's Got Talent to watch 4 judges give me the X, singing a song they thought was so beautiful. And Simon just being like, I mean, you have a fine voice, but talent.
Hey, I mean, this is nice. I mean, this would be nice, like, for, like, a step-grandfather's funeral, but not for all of America.
Oh, yeah.
If they nailed it like that, that'd be so funny.
Such a funny for him to just get step-grandfather right.
Did you do any talking or any, like, any material, like, you just cold launched into a song and then that was it?
It was just going to be the song, but I went up there and it felt so awkward. That I said, I just kind of gave the preface I gave you of like, I sang this for this and for this and for this. What I should have said, which was, I think I tweeted it later and I was like, oh, I should have, used it for the people, was that I once was talking to my grandfather. He left the priesthood to marry my grandmother, who was his secretary at the time. I'm sure in a different era, it would have been a Me Too thing, but in this case, it was beautiful and romantic. And, I once was talking to him. He was reading something he wrote. He wrote at NYU, and he referred to my grandma. He just said, "Oh, me and Frances went to the store." I knew her as Betty, and he said, "Me and Frances went to the store." And I was like, "Who's Frances?" And he said, "Oh, the other half of my soul." And that was the way he casually referred to my grandma. Just
wow,
like that. That was the very sweet part of him.
Yeah.
But then let me just say this. I'm so sorry. This is so me centric.
No, that's all right.
So I have a cousin who served in Afghanistan and he's in Africa now. And he was like, I guess, a big Trump supporter. And I think him and my grandfather, my grandfather was a pure Democrat to the very end. There was a picture of him with Bill Clinton, like one of the placards at the funeral was that. And someone read a letter from my cousin who was serving in Africa now or stationed in Africa now. And it was this like defense of the occupation of Afghanistan. It was like,
oh my gosh, they read it at the funeral?
Well, because my grandfather was very like, he was super anti-violence of any. He was a pacifist. He was a true blue pacifist.
Sure.
And like was against bullying. He like studied bullying and cyberbullying, and that was his thing. And this also the funeral was on 9/11, and it was one of these things where I'm like, oh, we don't have to bring up 9/11 at the funeral just because it's 9/11. There's no need to link these two things together. And it opened with this, like, my grandfather and I, we disagreed on a lot. He didn't understand that sometimes violence was needed. And this is being read.
That sounds like he murdered your grandfather.
and then he went on to say, he's like, I remember walking for September 11th, and we walked to Ground Zero. And I think in that moment, Grandpa, he understood that violence was needed. And I'm like, wow. Are you trying to win an argument from now that he is no longer here to respond? You fucking
putting on like all sorts of things onto a dead person, being like, I think that's wild.
And he said the word asshole twice in a space
in a letter.
Yeah. And it was like,
who had to read it?
It was his mother. And there was it was just so weird. At some point she was talking about some part of the family and she's like, this part of the family, they're good Republicans. And then, and the good, and it was just like this weird, I'm like, get the politics out of here.
What a strange thing. Sorry. What a strange way to, cause have you ever like spoken at a funeral?
No, I haven't. You have.
I've done a few. Not to brag. About my career.
Fuck it.
Cancer. But I've spoken at I think 2, maybe more, but at least 2 grandparents' funerals. And because my parents are very they're like, I think it makes sense with what I said before. They're just much more private about stuff, and I'm the public talker in the family.
Of course.
And so I kind of get asked to speak, like from the time that I was pretty young, like early 20s for sure, would get asked to speak at a funeral. And I do think that it is like, it's you. I almost said before you told the story about that letter, I was almost like, you kind of can't go wrong if you just like speak kindly. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, because the quality of the writing is not that important. It's just kind of like that you express a like kindness, and that you're there, like you were saying, Gianmarco, that you're there for the people in the room, and you just like want to make the feeling in the room like full of love and support and like and emotional presence. And I think people get it wrong less frequently than with like a wedding toast, where people just biff it all the time because they're like, I'm gonna be so friggin' funny, but like nobody, you almost never hear that at a funeral. People, maybe you go on a little too long, but it's like, what else are we gonna do today? We're at the funeral.
Yeah. Did you have any funny in yours? Like,
I did a little bit. I had a couple little lines about, like, because my grandmother was like a very wonderful, like, I had a wonderful relationship with her, but she's also very opinionated, and like so she would do things like she was very particular about gifts. Like, if you gave her enough gifts that she was like, I don't see where this would fit in my home, she would just be like, you don't have to do that anymore. Which is like so funny. But also, she'd traveled the world, and she'd been to all 7 continents just for recreation and like personal enrichment, and she would come back with the worst souvenirs. Like, not like, it's hard to buy a good souvenir, you know what I mean? If you're like, especially like at souvenir prices, and you're buying it for like 6 relatives, you're not going to be like, here's a beautiful diamond I found from a Russian jeweler. It'll be like, oh yeah, here's a hat that has the Kremlin on it or whatever.
That's why you get those magnets. It's just like, put it on the fridge.
That's it too. Like, you would always get like that little stuff, and it would just be like, fine. But it was so I think I mentioned something about that, and just like, just a little thing, that's something that like the whole family, I think, knew and agreed on and thought was like a funny quirk. But I wouldn't have gone in if she and I had some kind of personal disagreement that the rest of the family found uncomfortable. I wouldn't have like gone in hard on that.
Well, the other weird thing about funerals is, I don't know how this was the experience, Gianmarco. I can't remember if we talked about this before, but there's this weird thing if someone's not religious or doesn't know the person who's leading the thing. Yeah. It's almost like Mad Libs, where they learn 3 things about the person, and then they just kind of fill it in, and it's so unnatural, and you're like, oh, they knew 2 things about my grandfather, and they really forced that into the thing, because they're like trying to, and that as a family member, they had no real relationship.
I'm just meeting this guy. He didn't know that
guy. And it's so funny. I remember I had a cousin pass, and it was this weird thing where they try to make things work that you're like, it was just like sitting there being like, he's like, and you know what? She loved this time of year. The holidays were her favorite time. So it's almost appropriate. Like, no, she probably would have liked to be alive during this holiday. Like, it just was a weird, they just try to make things, I don't know. It's very weird.
I think you especially watch it though, like, as we're all creatives, we're all in the arts. Yeah. And like, these are people, a lot of these people, it's kind of, they're producing their first show, and they're not great at it. Cause you're like, they go with the structure of the church, and they get a little bit of a rubric, but I'm like, oh, you could have this room bawling right now. You could have us laughing. Yeah. We are all there more than any other public event to feel.
Yes.
And
if you organize a little better, got a little more creative, and also just really got more information from the family. I just feel like it feels very autopilot.
Don't have a priest leading it. It's a crazy job for them to do this many funerals.
Right. Because it's like, it's going to come off a little impersonal just by virtue of like, oh, this is they do this for half the dead people in town, and so it's just tough, especially if it's like a family that has like an affiliation with the church or whatever, or like, but like doesn't go regularly, or synagogue, my grandmother, atheist, we talked about it, like in her early 80s, maybe, we had lunch. I took her out to lunch before I moved. I mean, this is 10 years ago. Before I moved to New York, I took my grandmother out to lunch, and we just like really got into it in like a really wonderful way. Just like really going deep on stuff that like maybe we suspected about one another, or like I suspected about her, but she was just like, yeah, I don't really like God isn't really a thing for me, and like just like really talked through a lot of like she's like very progressive and like really open about this kind of stuff. And she got, I'm trying to think of how this happened, because Jews don't usually cremate, but she was like, I want to be cremated, but I want to be buried with family. So she had the foresight to like, I don't know, maybe in her 60s or 70s, get a note from a rabbi that our family was close with that she could be cremated and then the urn could be buried in her burial plot. So she got like a special dispensation from this rabbi. But she was also, I mean, this was, I must have mentioned this at the funeral, but she was cremated in a Tom Brady jersey. Like, it's very New England.
Right.
And so I've said it on stage, but that's like, it's like a real thing. And like, I'm sure I brought that up because my aunt was like, oh yeah, this is befitting. And so those kind of details are like the kind of things that in family you can talk about. But like, if you're just someone that's like, okay, you're reading from like a checklist of like her 5 favorite things according to their kids on the saddest day of their life. You know what I mean? Like, what did mom like? Oh, I don't know, like Penhale vodka? Like, who knows? Like, I'm so sad.
If you ever worked on something and Tom Brady was there, would you share that with him?
I think I would.
Yeah.
I think I would tell
my
him.
grandma was cremated in your
How would
jersey.
you handle that?
That is so funny.
That's his problem. That's
his problem.
I think
I've heard a lot of grandmas that have been cremated in a Tom Brady.
I'm sure. I bet it happens more than you think. Just not with Jews. I'd never heard of it with Jews before. But it's true. And it's like, I do think I would say it because I think of that as like a fond memory. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it would be too heavy to put on him. Like that she lived like a wonderful life. This was a decision the family made that is like a little quirky, but it's not like one of those things that's like, it's not like me being like, my cousins think you're very sexy. Like something weird, you know what I mean? It's like,
you should pitch to him. You should pitch to Tom Brady that when he's cremated, he should wear a shirt with my
grandmother's face on it. Yeah.
It's only fair.
This presupposes that this relationship where I work with Tom Brady and then we stay in touch. But he, yeah. So, but I do think like making that kind of stuff personal is it's so helpful, and it really, you can tell, right, Russ? Like you were saying, like you can really tell when it's a guy being like, she loved her kids, and all 4 of them. She had 4 kids. She loved them.
Well, it's the same thing with weddings too. Wedding people are, weddings, funerals. It's just very much like you can tell when there's been some time and thought put into it, and when it's just like, oh, just plug and play.
Well, that's the thing with my stepfather's mom's funeral. So my step grandmother, she was very Catholic, and this was my first like super Catholic funeral. And this language is so, I was watching, this was during Game of Thrones, and the language is so clearly like was written at a time where there were competing religions. So they kept saying the one true God. It made me think of Game of Thrones, where there's this constant verbal a reaffirmation of this is the God, not that God, one true God. And I was like, it felt like, get this PR for your fucking church out of my grandmother's funeral.
Yeah.
Right? How do we know? And like, right, it's not time. It's almost like if you were just like it's a beautiful sunny day, God smiling down upon us. Here we are at this gorgeous plot of land, this cemetery down the street from the one true Subaru dealership. It's like, come on, we're here to like think about this person's life and our relationship to this person and to each other and to our own lives. We're not here I mean, maybe some people are. Maybe some people want that. Maybe some people are like, hell yeah, one true God. That's who she's kicking it with now. But that's never been how I felt personally.
Yeah. Let me say real quick, I always am doing this later and later in the shows. This is The Downside with Brady. Thank you for listening. This is a show where we explore all the negatives, all silver linings are debunked, and we celebrate negativity. If you enjoy the show, please consider joining the Patreon. You get early episodes, ad-free episodes, bonus episodes, 2 a month. It's patreon.com/downside. Let's talk. So Josh, you grew up in Massachusetts, Stoneham, is that correct?
Stoneham, Massachusetts, or Stoneham is like it's a very the regional thing is like almost all the HAM cities are just like Stoneham, Dedham, Wareham, yeah.
And what are I don't know Boston too well. My brother is going to BC right now.
Sure. Yep.
So I'm trying to get more gigs there so I can see him.
Yeah.
Whether
There's
he
some
wants
good.
it or not.
We'll talk about it later. Let's text about it. But like,
sure.
Because there are some fun rooms up there.
Thank you.
And I loved I mean, I'm really grateful for the time I spent there doing comedy, and I always love to go back.
You started stand-up.
I started stand-up there. Yeah.
Now, let me ask, because I know like the Dane Cook started Boston. Louis C.K. started Boston.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
I always got the impression from hearing like old interviews of those two that Boston is like you gotta be a loud comic. They talk about it in a way where like the rooms are tough. They're rough and tumble rooms.
So there are some of those in a way. Like it's really one thing I liked about starting stand up there is that there are all kinds of rooms, right? Like when I started, there would be like the like road, quote unquote road rooms where you would like drive out 45 minutes into the suburbs and be like doing a youth hockey fundraiser, right?
Yeah.
And with just all people that knew each other because their kids played hockey together. Or you would play like a club in Cambridge, like right across the street from the Harvard campus. The Comedy Studio was there before, a little bit before I started, and a few years before I started, and that would be very like focused audiences, kind of showcase style club, closer to like a New York comedy club.
Sure.
And then you would do that. Then there would be the downtown rooms, and some of those were like a little like people would be out drinking, and like they would expect. The way I always describe it is like they expect. It's like they're the crew of a pirate ship, and they want to have a good time being pirates, and they want you to be you're the captain. But if you're like, hey, I was thinking maybe we pillage that island, they can smell that, and they don't like. So you don't have to be super loud. It doesn't like have to be aggressive, or at least by the time I was starting there. But you do have to show that you're like in control, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And there were people there that were like Bill Burr started there,
yes.
But also Stephen Wright, earlier, but like you get it, and Mike Kaplan, and so it's like kind of stylistically all over the map. But there are rooms where the audiences are like, we need you, like, prove it, like we want you to be good, but because there are rooms where you walk into where they're like, we don't want you to be good. You know what I mean? Like, you've done those shows where it's just like, oh, this is an unwinnable environment, or at least for me it was. But like in these rooms downtown, it was like some of them, they're like, yeah, we want to have a good time, but if you're not good, it's going to be like at your expense. Like, we'll just start talking and having fun while you're talking.
I think I have a skewed vision of Boston just because it's become this sketch comedy trope.
Sure.
30 Rock. Like my opinion of Boston is half informed by 30 Rock.
Sure.
Half by like SNL sketches and that one commercial where they said "Park the car" 10 times in a row.
John Krasinski. Yeah. It's but it is like, it is a really interesting like environment for comedy, because you can go, it's like the city itself is very small, and so like you can go not very far in any direction and have like a very different experience culturally. Like you can be downtown, or used to be, but I mean, like, there's the Wilbur Theater, which is beautiful. It's like this gorgeous theater. I've only played it once. I went to open for John Oliver after the first year I worked for him. And it was like, it's like a 1,200 seat theater, somewhere between 11 and 13. And it's gorgeous. And it's like, it has the vibe of a comedy club. It's run by people that used to run a big club in the city. And it's just like, oh, this is the best crowd, like the best circumstances for comedy. It's like 1,000 people, super focused, just like losing it. And then you can go like truly across the street to Nick's Comedy Stop, where it's like 150 people, and maybe a bunch of them got in for free and are already drunk, or they're waiting for the nightclub that starts after to open, whatever it is. And it's just like rowdier. And then you go up the highway like 12 miles, and then it's like there are two clubs that are on opposite sides of the highway, one in a giant Chinese restaurant, and one in an Italian restaurant with with like a fake Leaning Tower of Pisa in front of it. And it's just like, it's like real suburban crowds that are like, they go out to see like their favorite Boston comedians a couple times a year. And like, and they kind of expect that like fast, kind of loud style, a little bit more. Or if you're downtown, you go across the river and now you're in Cambridge at the Comedy Studio. So it's like all pretty dense, but it's just like every kind. You know what? That's not true. I never really did. There are some exist, but I never really crossed over. There are a couple like, I mean, the like slang term in the industry is like urban rooms, but like predominantly black crowds and comics, and I was like never really part of that scene, even though I knew the comics. I just like never really did those rooms.
I'd love to see you do those rooms.
I think I would like to
figure
now.
them out. You do them.
I think I feel like I would be more. I just feel like more comfortable and capable on stage now than I was whatever a decade ago. But it was also just like, you know, but I don't think that scene, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn, I don't think it's like as big as the like urban scene is, like even uptown in New York or like in Chicago or Philadelphia. Like it feels like, but that was not a scene I was really a part of. But like there are so many different kinds of crowds that are geographically so close together, and you can, you know, even within a weekend, you're like, oh yeah, I did this fundraiser show, or I did this benefit show, or just a regular like back room of a restaurant gig, and then like drove downtown and like did a spot on a late show at a club, which was like, it was very fun. And I feel like I'm not a big like, you've got to pay your dues. Like I'm not that kind of guy, but I do think there is a value to like trying all sorts of different rooms when you're starting out, to be like, oh, these audiences exist, and like maybe this is what I have in common with them, this is what I don't. I do think there's a real value to that, and I'm not like the kind of guy that's like, you have to kill in every room that has comedy all across America, because like not everybody's work translates in that way. And I think there's lots of great people kind of across the spectrum that don't work as well in every room. And I wouldn't want to be like, no, you're not, like, this comic isn't valid because they can't play like a coffee house in Northampton because their energy is too aggressive, or this comic isn't good because they're too experimental to play at like a, you know, to headline comedy, like a school benefit, you know, PTA benefit in like the suburbs, you know.
I still think one of the funniest videos online, I don't know if you've ever seen it, it's Nanette at the Apollo, where they mixed in,
oh no, I've not, that's so
Anna
funny,
Gatsby doing Nanette at the Apollo, and it's just so funny.
But I mean, I think that's it. That's exactly the point, right? Is like, there are audiences that have certain expectations and comics that have certain skills, and they don't always meet. And I think like it's good to try out different kinds of rooms and be like, oh, I like this, or like this was challenging in a way that I don't like, and it's okay that I know that, and I tried it, and like maybe I will not seek this out as much in the future.
Yeah, I think it's more just like, it's about having respect for, I think on both sides of the spectrum. If you want to make it urban Brooklyn, there's sometimes it's like a judging of the other, like, oh well,
totally,
there's not respecting it.
And I do try, I mean, in New York, to play different kinds of rooms as much as like that opportunity is afforded to me, and I try not to like look down on people that play one kind of room more than another. You know what I mean? Like I feel like that kind of divide was like maybe more pronounced when I was starting out, about like, oh, do you do the comedy clubs or do you do the alt rooms? And I think a lot of people do both, and then some people only, you know, play to one type of audience more than the other. But that, I think that's like, what are your goals artistically? Who are the audiences that come to see you? Who are the audiences that you don't resonate with? And that's all like worth thinking about, and like not thinking that the audiences in one kind of room or the comedians in one kind of room are like beneath consideration because they don't do what you do, or they don't respond to what you do.
So now, growing up in the Boston area, is that, would you call that the Boston area?
Yeah, I would say Boston area, yeah.
What are the downsides of living in Boston?
Oh, I mean, it was like, I grew up in a pretty homogenous town. It was like, it was very white. It was very not very Jewish either, the town that I grew
Sure.
up in.
I was curious because
Yeah.
are both your parents Jewish?
Both of my parents are Jewish, and I had a lot of Jewish friends, but they grew up like a few towns over, and so I would see them a lot when I was, like, especially once I could drive, I would see them a lot, and but it was just like I wish that I had. Not wish. I think that I could have benefited from growing up in a place where I like met more different kinds of people demographically.
Yeah.
Because I definitely I moved to New York and I'd gone to college at this point and I met international students and students from all over the country. But definitely I moved straight to Harlem when I moved to New York
in
City.
Harlem for about 8 years. So yeah.
And
We're in Harlem.
I lived at Hamilton Heights, rather, like Broadway, 137th and Broadway, and I lived there for like 3.5 years, and I just remember being like, oh, this is like a different cultural experience than I'm used to from where I lived in Boston, because I think the city feels very segregated, or it did when I was living there, still very segregated racially. Like there were neighborhoods where it was like that were like more people of color, but there just was less crossover culturally. You know what I mean? Like there just weren't places where it was like, oh, I have friends in this neighborhood or whatever. And like that, some of that's on me, and some of that is just on like how the city is laid out in a way that is like kind of structurally unfair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you left Boston. You went to Brandeis.
Yes.
Where's that?
Yeah. It's just west of Boston. So it's like 8 miles west of Boston. Yeah.
And when did you know you were going to do comedy, when you were doing writing, English, Spanish?
I started, so my freshman year, I started doing improv. And after my freshman year, I started doing stand-up. And then my junior year, my roommates and I had moved off campus, but we started a sketch group too. So I was doing a lot of comedy, even in college. And especially by like junior, senior year, I had a car on campus, and I would just like zip into the city and do. My friend Aaron Judge had a sketch show that I contributed to that was like one Sunday a month, and like I was doing stand up on the weekends, and so like I was doing like, the balance kind of kept leveling off between like comedy and schoolwork as I got closer to graduation.
Are you as good a student as you seem like you'd be?
I was a pretty good student. I got good grades. I'm much better like in class. Like I never cut class, but I would like skirt or shirk some of the readings sometimes because I'm a good listener and note taker. So like I could skim the readings and still be like, oh yeah, this is like what they said in class. This is what the professor said in class, and I get it enough to write a paper or to like take a test. And because I was a good high school student, I was like exempt from science and math requirements because of like AP tests. So by the time I got to college, I was just like, oh, I never have to look at a number or think about a number until I pay taxes.
Yes. Now, because this is the downside, you are a bald?
I'm a bald, yeah.
You were bald. When did you start balding?
19, very young.
19?
Yeah, really young. Started thinning out. And I knew it was coming. My dad is a bald. So I knew it was coming, and he started young
the dad,
too.
I always feel confused. I feel like they're always like, oh, it's actually your mother's side.
I've heard that too. My maternal grandfather also, like, it's balds all the way down. And so I knew it was coming. And so this is something I think about a lot, because I've said this on stage as well, but I think if you're going to go bald, do it young. That's how I feel about it, because there's less question. Like, sure, you don't have like a great head of hair in your early to mid 20s, but you know the man you're going to be. Like, I would much rather start in college and be like, okay, this is who I am. This is what I'm going to look like, rather than be like, oh, I hope this part of my identity sticks around until I'm forever, I guess. And so it was like, I mean, the downside of it is like, it is goofy looking when you're young.
Where does it starts in the middle, right?
It depends. No, it depends on.
So, yeah.
Mine was like, I went mostly from the front back, and then it started from the back forward.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any point in your life where you looked up at the heavens and said, why, God, why?
I definitely at the time was like, yeah, fuck me. Like it's not fun when you're 19 and you're like dating in college and you're a kid, and you're like nobody. I don't know. I just don't feel like it is the kind of thing. Like I'm 36. I'm married. I think by the time I met my wife, my hairline was pretty dog shit. I met when I was 29. We met when I was 29. But that's like, I would rather that, because she knew what she was getting into, follically speaking. But like when you're 19, it just feels like the if that's something that someone is thinking about, like it's just less a reality for other people your age. Does that make sense? So like by the time you're in your late 20s, early 30s, that's like, yeah, a lot of guys are like this. And it's like, yeah, you can date a 23-year-old guy if you want, or you could date a guy that's maybe bald. And when you're 19, it's like there are more choices for not me.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, where like I see you in my mind's eye, you exist as a bald person, and it looks like that's your look.
That's just what I look like, right?
It looks like
I agree.
Totally.
I think it's good too, because when I think of the people in my life that I knew that like went bald so young, I was like, whoa, like they're going bald, but we were all aware, and they were aware, and they got some, like it was like something to talk about for them too. It was, but like it's later on, it's when you get into 30s and stuff, and it starts happening. It's a slower, harder process for the person, I believe. And who cares if you're gonna go bald in your late 30s or 40s? You're like, yeah. So it's not people aren't like, oh, it's more just like, it's a harder process to accept, right. I think, as an individual, and you don't get any kudos for it.
It is just part of the aging process that I took care of early on, and I think that is fun, right? Yeah. And, but at the time, for sure, it was something I was like a little more self-conscious about. Like, I don't think it like never stopped me from like having a good life and having friends and dating and stuff, but it definitely was like the kind of thing where I was like, oh yeah, this is like, I wish I'd hung on at the time. I wished I'd hung on a little longer. Now I'm like, who cares? Like I turned into me faster.
Yeah,
that makes sense. I think in my head, I still have I'm 33 now, and there still is that thing, whether it's stand-up comedy or acting, and they're like, oh, you're young. Yeah. And every time I hear that, all I can think is like, when is that going to stop?
Well,
when are they going to go? When are they going to go? Oh, well, you're
right. Oh,
you're okay.
You're
okay where you are.
I think it's the transition more than anything, right? It's not like being bald is good and having hair is bad, or having hair is good and being bald is bad. It's just like turning from one thing into another that's the hard part, especially working in entertainment, where you go, oh, this is how people see me. I can do this kind of stuff. And then when people start perceiving you differently, it's not just like, oh, I look a little different. I'm getting older. It's like, oh, what do I do professionally? What is my new thing? Like
headshots. You just gotta think about headshots. You're waiting for the point of someone to be like, these headshots, they feel like a lie now.
Yeah. Like, this is different. You're this guy's dad.
Yeah, the casting director actually cast you on an episode of Catfish because they feel like you lied to them with this submission. Oh, exactly. God. So you moved to the city, and then you taught preschool. Was this in Massachusetts?
In Boston, in Massachusetts, Boston. in Arlington, which is another suburb. So I lived in the city and around the city, and taught preschool in the suburbs. So I'd commute every day.
And was that a job? Did you enjoy that?
It was great. It was a job that never lasted past 6 p.m., which is great. Like I was never like, shit, I'm slammed at work today. They made me take 6 of the kids home.
like I got these tests. Oh, no, that's not a job.
Yeah. Oh, god damn it. Yeah, grading all weekend.
Yeah.
So it was it was a very relaxed, it was a job that was high focus, because you'd be like, oh, you can't just eat a spoonful of sand. Like I had to be on alert for that. But it was also like the kids were like, some of them were a little like sassy, but for the most part they were really sweet, and my co-teachers were great, and like I had a really supportive school where my bosses mostly were like, sure, yeah, go do your thing. And like if I had to, this is the trick I learned, because sometimes I would be out late doing shows, and I would have to come in at whatever 8:30 to teach. And you don't, when you show up at a preschool, it's not like having an office job where you like sit at a desk and kind of like check your email for 20 minutes and like ease into things. You're like, oh, here I am, and there are children. So I would wear a shirt and tie on the days where I was out really late, and instead of people being like, oh, you look fucking awful, they'd be like, ooh, someone dressed up today.
Wow. Oh, that's really funny.
It worked. It was shocking how much it worked. I would just come in. I would be like, "Oh yeah, I was doing shows, and then I hung out and got home at like midnight and went to sleep. Hung out with my roommate for another hour and went to sleep at 1 and got up at 7. And so I'd come in like shirt and tie, and they'd be like, "Wow, someone's prepared for work today." And I would just be like bleeding from the corners of my eyes, like, "Yeah, I feel really prepared," looking like I just lost a fight.
Any bad things happen with the kids? Anyone eat something they shouldn't have? I would always feel scared. I'd just be scared. It's just a lot of responsibility.
It is a lot of responsibility. I think there were definitely some like little injuries, and I think you kind of have to get used to that. Like it's like in a lot of tantrums, like the 4 is still of the age where there are still kids. I was working with 3.5 to 5-year-olds, and there are still kids at that age that like every day, if they don't take a nap in the middle of the day, they'll just kind of like come undone at 3 p.m. Yeah. And you'll be like, hey, let's put away the crayons so we can go outside. And then they'll just like hurl themselves on the floor, just bawling like a war widow. And so that stuff was tough, but I was pretty good at it, like in terms of just like staying calm. The teachers that I worked with would give me credit for that too. Like there would be just like a little 4-year-old just losing their mind, just screaming and crying, and I'd be like, I know it's really hard when you're not done drawing your elephant yet and we have to go outside, but that paper's going to be there forever. That's a beautiful thing about crayons, that they'll be here when we come back in. And like just like screaming, but I wanna, and my co-teachers would be like, how are you just sitting there? And my line that I would always say is like, when you're a, and this, I don't mean this pejoratively, but like when you are a man who dates women, you get used to other people crying.
Sure.
And like, because I'm not, and this is not a brag, I'm like a pretty emotionally cloistered person when it comes to like expressing frustration and displeasure and sadness. But I am used to it from people that I'm close to. And so like, I'm just used to like, oh yeah, sometimes another person cries and that's okay. And you just have to like hear them and validate their feelings and like offer support where you can. But I really do, like, I know it's like very like kind of, it's like deeply, possibly problematically heterosexual to say, but definitely when you are a person who is around people who are crying when you don't want them to be crying, when you're like, I'd rather you weren't crying right now, you get used to it and you get those skills.
I think Tova, I've had like two big cries in front of Tova, and I told her, I was like, all right, the score is now 2-973.
Yeah.
I wish I cried more. There's times I almost try to lean on it. Yep. And when I was an actor, there was a time like I wanted to cry for those reasons. But even now, just as a human being, there's times I'm like, I feel things. I want to have a cathartic release out my face. And instead, it's just like,
I'm also embarrassed by what makes me cry, not because it's like I wish that I cried across the board more, but I don't. Like when it's like, hey, this person that you're, an old friend passed away, I'll be like, shit, that's really sad. I feel really bad about this. I feel turmoil inside, but not crying. And then they're like, Ted Lasso really taught his team what it means to work together for a common goal, and that maybe is more important than the goal itself. And I'm just like biting my lip as tears stream down my cheeks. And I'm just like, what the fuck is wrong with me that this is what's doing it?
It doesn't always track of like you'll hear things and it'd be like, this should be the thing.
This should be the thing.
And then I'm crying. I cried yesterday at Below Deck Mediterranean.
Whoa! What was happening on Below Deck Mediterranean?
Okay, well I'm behind. So it was when Hannah, I don't know if anyone knows any of these people. Hannah was on the show for like 5 seasons as our like person. She's our audience surrogate. Like we're like following her thing. She got fired and it was shitty. Shoot. And it was like she has anxiety. And so she was getting fired for having Valium, for having anxiety issues. And it was so upsetting. I was like, and she was our surrogate. I was like, I'm going to keep watching this show without this person who was like leading us,
see this
shepherding us through the show. So, but you know, I shouldn't be crying at Below Deck Mediterranean. I shouldn't, but I did, you know. You can't track it. You can't track it.
It's not that I wish that I didn't cry at the others, at the stuff that like does set off. Like I'll just be like, Tom Brady is still thriving at such a high level, and even though he's playing in Tampa Bay, I honestly, it's just a marvel how his skills have been eroded, and he's learned how to work in this new context. And like, and then it'll be like, hey, you should go to the doctor. You haven't been feeling well, and I'll be like, okay, yeah. Sure. And then I'll just be like, lie awake in bed feeling horrible and not releasing it into the world at all.
What makes you yell, Chad? When was the last time you yelled?
It's not a lot of.
Are your parents calm? Like, are your parents also very calm and even keeled?
My parents are. Yeah. My mom especially is like my parents are both very like sweet and lovely people. My dad is a person who is like very like I was saying, kind of quiet when things are bad. Like if he's not feeling well, he's not gonna be like, everybody shut up, I need to lie down. He'll just kind of be like, oh, I'm gonna go get this thing upstairs, and then you'll notice like 3 hours have passed and he's just been like lying face down with a migraine or something. You know what I mean? Like just doesn't raise attention to himself in that way. And my mom is like incredibly diplomatic in a way where my dad will speak his mind a little bit more, like in a public situation. If somebody's doing something fucked up, he'll be like, hey, could you excuse me? You know, he's not going to be like get into a fight about it, but he'll like give it a little something. And my mom is like incredibly diplomatic, which I think inherited from her, just like a tendency to be like, oh yeah, sure, like I'll just like work around it. Yeah, like that's
it just still blows me away, the emotional tendencies I've taken from my parents that I don't like and are just deeply. I went today, my God, I was trying to get the Ambien, so I got this prescription of Ambien. They prescribed it to the Duane Reade. I go to the Duane Reade. They go, this Duane Reade doesnn't accept your insurance. You have to transfer it to the CVS. And it was just, I acted like I had just found out the healthcare system isn't great. I was just like, oh God. I was so just filled with anger and rage.
Yep.
And I wish I had your calm.
I sometimes, like, when I think I'm like exploding with rage, I'm just being like kind of like sarcastically passive aggressive. And so it, like, on one hand, I'm not like lashing out at people, but on the other hand, sometimes I do think that I could be better at just like clearly saying things that I feel, or like, you know, I could be more both like healthy in my communication and more like effective in my communication by just being like, I would like this, please. You know what I mean? Of like, oh, I have to transfer this. Well, why don't you call them and do that, please? Because I was not told that this, you know what I mean? Just like, you, not like a monster, but just like, sure, I hear what you're saying, and I've never been to that CVS, so can you call them and get this transferred? Because, like, this is not, I imagine you've come across this before. Like, can you give me the phone number? You know, like that kind of thing. Like, it's, and like, just being like, okay, let's figure this out. Whereas normally, my thing, I'll just be like, oh, that's real fucking convenient, and then just walk away and handle it by myself. You know what I mean?
Ooh, I like that.
Just like that. Under my breath, just like, oh, sure, yeah. Very cool of my fucking doctor not to say anything about this. and then I'll be like, I'm very sorry. I understand this isn't your fault. You didn't do this. You don't work at the insurance company. You're not the one who called this in. I hear you. Thank you for what you've done. But, you know, I try not to like take it out on people, but I definitely am like, oh, I could be more direct, just in terms of like not just taking it on myself and like seething.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now I want to touch on, before we get to this, has got to stop, your pep talks, which you know, I see them on Twitter. I think once I was, I don't mean this as offense, I was so low, I thought maybe I'll call.
Anytime.
Like, I was in a dark, like, for me to do that, I'd have to be.
Well, that's why I started them, because I was feeling so bad. And this kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier, where I don't always ask for things well. I'm getting better, but like
Yeah.
this was like 2013. I was in like a pretty bad career place. Like I just felt like all the things that I
2017?
No, 2013.
2013. Okay.
Yeah. And I just all the things that I thought I was lining up professionally were kind of were falling away one by one. And then
I don't know what that's like.
it was a bummer. It was just like I had these little things that I was like, oh, this is going to get me to the next place. And it felt like those levels in the old Mario Brothers games where you're like walking across a bridge and then the blocks start falling out from underneath you. And I was just like, oh, it's gone. The things that I thought I was working towards. And I was in a relationship with a person who is great, but I think like we broke up a few months later, and I think there was like a little tension there that I was like trying to figure out how to resolve, and probably not doing a great job at like communicating and resolving like whatever cracks were in that relationship. And so I was just in this bad place, and I was on Twitter and I was like, I really want to hear something encouraging from someone, but I was like, it felt just so weird to text somebody or like call somebody and be like, hey, just no reason, but like, tell me it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And so I was like, maybe if I offer to do this for someone else, then there's a context for like having this kind of conversation. And it was, it was 8 years ago. I had a few thousand followers probably. And then people were like, maybe a dozen people were like, yeah, I want to hear something nice. And I'd be like, hey, you got great sunglasses in your profile picture. Or like, it seems like you're working on really cool stuff. I hope it feels satisfying to you. Just like little things. And I've been doing it like every once in a while for like the last, I guess, 8 years now. But that's how it came about. It was because I was feeling bad and I didn't have the skills to think about what I needed. This is something I tweeted this like 3 months ago, but this is something I really feel is like, I know it's healthy to tell people what you're feeling. And I know, and I'm pretty good at like pinpointing and articulating that now. I'm like much better. But when I do, it's just like, well, now I still feel that way. And other people know my terrible secrets. This seems like a raw deal to me.
Yeah. Well, that's maybe I will call. Do people call ever in tears?
No, I mean, it's usually just people writing back on Twitter, or sometimes I'll get
back.
Yeah, sometimes I'll get a DM.
It.
Yeah. So sometimes I get a DM. So it's all over text. But like, if it's sometimes a friend will like write privately about it. But like, usually it's just people writing on Twitter, and I'll write back publicly. But yeah, But I think people have. I mean, like, I'm not an advice giver. I'm not a qualified advice giver, but people will say things like some really serious stuff like, oh, I lost a loved one recently and I'm feeling really low, and or like,
your sunglasses look great though,
killer sunglasses, and I solved it. But like, there are things that I've found that you can say to a person that are like helpful and comforting, even from a stranger, even just to go like, even just to remind someone like, this sounds like you're having a really hard time and I can't imagine the pain you're in. But like, I bet there are people in your life who really want to be there for you and love you and care about you. And if you reach out to them, I bet that process won't be as scary as you think it is like right now. And I think that like holds in a lot of situations, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like that kind of stuff. So even though it's not like real, I'm not like solving anyone's problems. I can just be like, or even like, oh, I have this big job interview. I'm really terrified. I really want this job. I haven't worked in 4 months. It's just like, hey, you got the interview because you're you. So you just go in there and be the you that you are. That's who they want to meet. You didn't trick them. I mean, unless they tricked them. But in that case, like, that's their problem. That's not my fault.
I do love imagining the Gianmarco equivalent of doing this, though. And Gianmarco being like, you think that's bad? I haven't been past the Comedy Cellar yet.
John Hodgman.
Saying his thing is worse.
John Hodgman occasionally will be like, wow, once Josh is done, if anyone wants to be put in their place for 5 minutes, tweet at me.
I love that.
And he's very funny about it.
All right, well, let's go to on our next segment. This has got to stop.
This has got to stop.
This has got to stop, where we talk about something in the world that needs to stop. Russell, do you have one today?
Yeah, real quick. This got stop me getting COVID repeatedly, twice now, and vaccinated. It's also my blessing. I'm going to put them together because I got a breakthrough case of COVID last week on Thursday, had some symptoms Thursday, Friday. By Saturday night, felt great, feel great now. It was so mild compared, I was lucky pretty much both times I've gotten COVID, but definitely much more mild after the vaccine. But I just don't want to keep getting it. It's one of those things where I know it's, I just, in my mind, I was like, okay, well, I had it, I'm vaccinated, but not like I was going crazy places. I went to rehearsal, I went to a coffee shop. I just don't want to keep getting it. So I think I'm good. I've done the 2 major strains, and I hope I don't want to do it again. I don't want to do it again for a while, for the rest of the year at least. So this has got to stop me getting COVID. But also, blessing vaccine. Thank you very much. Way nicer experience doing it with the vaccine. So I feel lucky about that, and I feel very fortunate. Sorry, our show was canceled this past weekend. And it was like the busiest weekend for everyone in Uncle Function to have shows and weddings and things. And I'm so sorry that it happened and, whatever.
Yeah, but there really is because I got tested before I went to this funeral because I had seen Russell. And like everyone that you've come into contact with, it's this, no one's mad at you, but the circumstance sucks so much that it's always like yeah. After Russell, then I went to Tova, and Tova had the taping of Joyelle's special on Sunday,
right
at the Bell House, and Tova goes, "Oh, fuck."
Yeah,
I had that recently, similarly, where I had been at an outdoor thing with somebody, and I got an email that was like, "You should probably get a test." Like someone that was at this thing tested positive, and I was like, like again, it's people, a lot of times people are asymptomatic or the symptoms show up later, and it's like everybody, I think people are trying to do their best, and I came up negative, but it is like one of those, like exactly like you were saying, of just like, I'm mad at the person who tested positive, like that doesn't make sense. So many people are testing positive, but I was just like, oh, this is really gonna fuck up my week if it fucks up my week.
What's crazy, and not to pat myself on the back,
no,
but I do. But what is crazy is that like, I think the breakthrough thing is much more rampant because I think of like I had an at-home test at my house, and Thursday, because I had COVID before, I was like, oh, this is kind of like that, and I took it. But like by Friday or Friday afternoon, like I was pretty like good, but definitely had COVID still. I tested again on Saturday and still had it. So the thing is, I just feel like I had that at-home test, and I was like, yeah, I should do it. And I was when I saw that it was positive, I was so like, fuck.
This shit again?
Fuck.
Man, he called me. It was like 11:30 at night.
Oh,
I was Googling death rates in people who've had COVID and had vaccinated, and I was like, it was like 0.000. It was very small, but I was like, that's gonna be me. It's gonna be me.
But at least it was a very precise decimal, as we discussed earlier.
Yes. So
I hope your pro-vaccine message gets as much traction as Nicki Minaj's -1.
Yeah, what happened to your balls?
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Pretty big to begin with. So my this is gonna stop. This pretty. I don't use Facebook very often, but these are very popular on Facebook. It's staged prank videos.
Yes.
I have a mixed feelings because pranks do make me laugh, but I've also read. I did What Would You Do on ABC, which is for those listening, it's a hidden camera show. And it's a really, it feels awful to do. I've made 2 people cry, like in my scenario. One was it never aired, where we were catfishing people. Essentially, they have been doing this show for so long, they've really run out of premises. And some of them are inspiring. Like there was one viral one where I think it was a black guy brought his white girlfriend to a barber shop, and they had actors like kind of harass her or make fun of the guy, and then regular people were like, no, a white person can be here. Which, looking back on all of it, now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm like, is this really the biggest problem?
Hiring
white people being harassed in black barbershops? Okay. But we did one where we catfished people, where like it was like a different picture in our Tinder thing. And this whole shoot, I don't know if you ever had a shoot like this, Josh, where it was the shoot times were based on Tinder messages where you would set up a date. And as you know, anyone who's dated, people were canceling, people were coming late, and we were hiding, going back. And like the first woman, you have an earwig in my ear. They're very like, do what we tell you to do.
Right.
So I sit down and they're like, ask when you're going to have a second date. The moment we sit down. So I sit down, I'm like, when do you want our second date to be? And then they're like, propose to her. And I'm like, oh, God. And they didn't end up airing it. She cried when he came out. It was very awful. But so I know pranks are bad. Pranks sometimes do make me laugh.
Sure.
But these staged pranks
ones
are the worst things I've ever seen.
And it's the worst of both worlds.
Yeah.
Right? In terms of like, it is the discomfort of watching someone like get tricked, but then it's just like, but what? So like you pretended to be like, you know what I mean? It like, I guess nobody's actually hurt, but it does feel like you're watching someone have an awful time.
Yes. And this is like where the internet is the death of art, where they really stretch out the like setup process because they need the Facebook video to be a certain length.
Right.
So sometimes I think I fall for it. I think, oh, maybe this prank is real. This seems funny. And then you see them like sneak behind the person, look at the camera like, and like, you're like, oh, there's no way that person doesn't go, what the fuck are you doing
behind me, right?
They do it for 5 minutes. And something about it, I hate it. They're the worst actors you've ever seen in your life. And just to top it all off, it has 59 million views.
Right.
And you're like, oh man, maybe this is what I have to do now. So Josh, I hope you found anything in the world that you would like to stop.
Yes. This has to stop is people saying like, you know, your joke about XYZ isn't helping. That's because, and not, I want to create like a real distinction here, because I do think there's a difference between like, this joke is hurting someone's feelings, or this joke is like perpetuating a really vicious and harmful stereotype. Sure, that is like really valid criticism.
Yes.
But like, your joke isn't helping is like, I'm not trying to help. I'm joking. Those are two different things. But like online especially, right? All the communication just it's in the same timeline and gets barfed out into the same stream. And so like people are coming to the same place for like medical advice and activism and jokes and porn. And it's like, it would almost, it's like truly as misguided like as if I make a joke and someone's like, your joke isn't making me horny right now, and you're like, that's because it's not the porn. This is one of the other things we're doing here.
This is not making me hard,
right? It's just a joke. And
I think it's more telling though of like some people are like, this my comedy is activism, like in this false thing of like sometimes it does get conflated, but it's very revealing to be like, well, that's not what this is for.
And I think comedy can be
very
righteous in its way. Like I saw,
we wrote for John Oliver. I mean, I think like John Oliver and like The Daily Show and all that stuff. I think it mixed things in people's brains a little in terms of like, oh, should all comedy be progressive,
pointed, political? I mean, like I saw, and I definitely think like I don't want to be doing comedy that is like hurting people or like propping up attitudes that are unhealthy and harmful. You know, like I really think about like not to say stuff that like bums people out. But there's lots of great comedy that is like explicitly expressive of like ideas and thoughts that are like really helpful for people to hear. Like I saw Roy Wood Jr. run his new hour last night, and it was like, I mean, he's as good as anybody, and
Astounding,
like his
astounding
and
comedian.
it's astounding, and it's like I think more than anyone maybe currently working, he balances like real sincere heavy ideas with like truly hilarious jokes, and I'm like, this is like it's like as good as it gets. But sometimes I'm just like, people are joking around, and you hear it mostly, like, to be more specific, it's in the context of like oh, your jokes about people eating horse medicine aren't actually helping people get vaccinated. And it's like, I'm not a public health official.
Yeah.
I'm not
Also,
the
like,
CDC.
Yeah. Also, your tweet about people who aren't vaccinated are fucking idiots is not helping
It's not
anybody
helping.
either.
Yeah.
We're all
It's
just
like-
expressing.
It's right. Sometimes it's just expressing a thought or making a joke. And I think as long as it's not like, especially if it's not a joke that is like hurtful to people, again, like I don't want to sound like, oh, you can't joke about anything because people criticize you. I don't mean that. I just mean like, communication happens for different reasons, and like jokes can hit different notes, and that's okay. And not everything has to be like in the service of the public good. Like some jokes can be funny and unharmful, like without being like instructive.
I just think I think especially with the online, especially Twitter, where a lot of this stuff happens. I always think of Twitter, it's like a newspaper without sections. So sometimes you're like, what is this Garfield comic doing in the middle of the 9/11 memorial piece?
Right.
It's just this constant stream, and some people don't want comedy. Like my father, I have a lot of dark jokes, and I love them. But like my dad is someone, he doesn't like it. I don't know the way his brain works. He sees it more vividly. Or if I make a pedophile joke, like all he can, his brain immediately goes to like people whose lives have been upended by abuse.
For sure.
And I'm like, my brain doesn't take me to that place yet. It's funny because it's so not what you're supposed to say, but we're all different.
Yes, totally. And I think like, I try not to begrudge when if I say something and someone is like, oh, that really like brings up something in me that is like painful. I try to really take that to heart and think about like, are lots of people having this, or is it something that I could have avoided by being more intentional with what I was saying? But when people are just like, hey, that's not helping, it's like, yeah, I'm not trying. That's like, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm not helping when I'm eating a slice of pizza, and I'm not helping when I'm like tickling my dog's belly. Like it's not all like, I want to be of service to people. I want to be helpful. I want to be productive. I want to like use my resources and platform for good. But that can't, as a comedian and as a person on social media, that's not the only thing I'm there for, and I think it's okay that it's not the only thing I'm doing.
I completely agree. Well, Josh, stop telling Josh to help, guys. Let's
You better count your blessings.
You better count your blessing. You can hear that, right, Josh?
Yes.
I was so paranoid that you just see me just
Thought
pause
you were
like,
singing a song I'd never heard before. Like, sure, yeah, I guess I'll learn it and I'll sing it on the second chorus.
So this is the time we say something we're grateful for. I'll go first on this one. This is a cute little one. I got a smoothie yesterday at Essen, and I'm tickled every time I get a smoothie and there's extra, and they give you that cup, that paper cup, extra in it, because especially since smoothies are not cheap, you're like, this is $3 according to you. This is $3 worth of a smoothie extra you're giving me. And I feel like that cup is honestly the best part of the whole smoothie experience, because you get the experience of finishing it. That you get to finish it, but there's a whole smoothie left.
Yep.
You get that like final gulp and knowing, oh, there's still more.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get it with all. I feel like you get it with beverage more than food, right? They're never like, and here's another 4 inches of submarine sandwich. But it is like I've had it with a milkshake, or like sometimes with a cocktail. You'll be at a restaurant and they'll bring it over, and there's like a little extra.
Yeah,
put in
the martini. They'll give you a
the
little
martini.
yeah. You know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I always love that experience of like, ooh, a little bonus treat.
Yeah. And maybe it's on purpose. If I ran a place, I'd do that on purpose. I'd make the regular smoothie smaller to give you the illusion we're being generous.
Oh, yeah.
We just made it smaller. Russell, you got a blessing?
I did mine.
You did yours. Yeah, your vaccine's working. Congratulations. Are you going to get a booster?
When I can, yeah.
But you should fucking. I feel like you deserve it. I feel like if you got the breakthrough, you get first in line for that booster.
In my mind, from reading a little bit, I feel like it's a little bit of a booster that I just had COVID again. But when I can, yeah, I'll do the booster. But I got Moderna, which I think is better too. That in terms of
the Moderna's supposed to be really good against the Delta variant. So I don't know what you did to fuck that up, Russell.
That's been there.
And Josh, you got a blessing?
I do. Mine is also food related. Lately, I've been really grateful for new flavors of things that I haven't tried before. So I went out for sushi and sat on a patio, ate some sushi with my friend, and she was like, let's get the chicken wings as an appetizer. And it came with like a wasabi hot honey that was really good. And then recently, there is a salsa, a salsita company called Tio Pelon, and Alex Hooper, the comedian who was in LA, tweeted at me that he saw this bottle of a jar of salsita, and he was like, Josh, I think they stole your image for this, because the guy, it's called Tio Pelon, which is Uncle Baldy. That's the name of the salsa, and the mascot is like a line drawing of the founder of the company, and he looks exactly like me. And so I tweeted about it. I was like, I think I am a salsa mogul, and they sent me a bunch of salsa, and they have this, it's called like salsa cremosa. It's like creamier and spicy, and I've been eating that on like everything. I'll put it on eggs, I'll put it on like a turkey burger. It's been great. So just like new flavors have been, for the past year and a half during the pandemic, I would just go to the bodega and be like, what ice cream you got? Like, give me something. I don't care if there's like cornflakes and mushrooms, whatever it is. If I haven't had it, I'll try it. So like new flavors of things, that's what I'm grateful for.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. I got to start looking for something that looks like
Gregory's coffee, Gianmarco. That's
Gregory's coffee when I have my glasses on.
Yeah. You gotta be like, am I Gregory?
If every white guy who wore glasses could claim Gregory's was him, got
hair
and they go bankrupt.
Look at the poster behind you, Gianmarco. That is Gregory's coffee thing.
This is
very Gregory's coffee.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna try to get some Gregory's coffee.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, thank you so much. Do you have anything you want to plug?
Oh gosh, I have a podcast called Make My Day. It's a comedy game show where there's one guest, so the guest always wins.
Couple or two podcasts together. Listen to mine first. Get down. Listen to it, depending on where you want to end. Start
right. Pick the order.
Go through a whole roller coaster every time.
It's a lot of different feelings. And then Jesus and Marrow comes back on Showtime in October. We've been off for a few weeks, and we'll be back in a few weeks.
And you are
I'm a writer and co-executive producer.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. They're the best.
For Uncle Function fans, I think we are going to reschedule this show sometime. Yeah. We teched it. We did everything.
Ready to go.
I think we'll cut the 9/11 sketch that we had that I was really proud of. We'll save it for next year. And for me, I'm not sure when this is coming out exactly yet, but I'm going to be at the Looney Bin in Oklahoma City. I'm going to be at Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle. And then I'm sure after this, I'm going to be headlining a lot of Boston shows just on Josh Gondelman's name alone.
Hell yeah.
Thank you for listening. And, let's hope my dad is fucking alive when this podcast comes out. This is The Downside.
1, 2, 3. Downside. Downside.